We're back. It's the Guy Benson Show. Still to come, Senator Joni Ernst, Josh Krausauer, Dr. Marty McCary. But joining me now, here in studio in New York, we were just in D.C. together by chance. Like you show up at a dinner, you don't know who's going to be there. Well, he was there. We've been to Israel together recently and now reunited once again, and it feels so good. Here in New York, it's Dave Rubin, host of the popular long-form talk show, The Rubin Report. You can find that online. Also a best-selling author. Dave, great to see you.
Guy, can we please, we did this in D.C. a week ago. Here we are in New York. We must do this in a red city soon. I cannot take much more of the filth and the vermin and it's actually a kind of nice day in New York, and it's not as terrible
the weather has been
as
incredible.
It might be. You know, I'm trying to be honest here.
Maybe I can come down to your neck of the woods.
Yes, come on down to Miami where life is thriving and we have no homeless people and everyone's happy and we have a great economy and it's safe and no Islamists taking over our streets. You'd love it.
That sounds good. I'm in. Let's talk about this Trump verdict and some of the fallout. Huge fundraising numbers for Trump, which is an indication of something. I'm not sure it's like you can draw a direct line between that and, oh, now he's going to win the election, but to some extent, there's been a sleeping giant awoken among at least the base or maybe Trump-leaning folks who now are really ticked off. But we've also seen the Democrats now running around just banging the drum, convicted felon. It's going to scare some voters off. What's your calculus here? How does this play out in your mind?
Right. Well, look, I don't know that it does anything to the base. The base is the base. They love the guy no matter what. As he said years ago, he could walk out onto Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and they'd still love him. So that's that part.
But some people who are like kind of at least base adjacent don't vote or don't always vote.
Right. So those are the interesting people on the right now. People who are either, I would say, the never Trump crew, or they just weren't into Trump, or they were maybe going to vote third party or sit it out altogether. I've seen a lot of those type of people, and I'm not just talking about Twitter. I'm talking about real life people, guys that I play basketball with, who suddenly were kind of just over Trump or just not that enthused, that suddenly are all about Trump. So I think something is shifting where this is no longer, Trump represents something at this point. It's not about the orange man with the crazy hair. It really is not. Now it is about, are we going to be a banana republic? Nobody in their right mind truly believes that a $130,000 payment to a porn star over an affair that maybe was mislabeled in the tax returns wrong is the reason that he should not be allowed
not even the tax returns,
to run
the internal books of the company.
Right. Well, the internal books of the company, that thus really what they're then saying the crime is that had something to do with election fraud, right? Because he was running for election, which maybe is why he made the payment in the first place. The point is, nobody thinks that in and of itself is somehow worthy of him being unable to run or potentially being in prison, which, by the way, I'll say it right now on this Monday. I mean, to me, he's going to prison now because how can they reverse this thing? They got 34 out of 34 counts on him, right? So is the judge suddenly going to be like, actually, guys, I thought about it and I've had all this time to deliberate because it's not till July 11th. And then he's going to be like, we're just going to give him 6 months probation. The left will go apoplectic. So, and then, of course, that the appeal probably will not go well because, as you know, the 5 Supreme Court judges in New York all happen to be black females, which in and of itself, your skin color and your gender shouldn't mean anything. But it's basically statistically impossible to have 5 black female Supreme Court justices. So you might think that this has a little something to do with DEI, which thus you could probably garner a bunch into some of their political beliefs. So he has the entire system against him right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many grounds for appeal in the case that it probably gets tossed at some point, but that could take years. It won't be done before the election. And I keep saying they don't care. Right.
That's the thing.
If it gets reversed next year, who cares? The whole point is to have convicted felon right now until November. That's it. Now, you were talking about some of the legal ins and outs of this. Someone who I have given props to on this show is a guy named Elie Honig at CNN, who's been a clarion voice of sanity over the course of this trial. Post-conviction, this is a longish clip, but I want you to hear, this is a top legal analyst at CNN, not a Trump fan, but I think telling it like it is, cut 9.
Yeah, so the jury instructions are so important. They're sort of dry, but they're crucial. They're the last thing the jury will hear before they disappear into that jury room to deliberate. And we, as a criminal justice system, we do the best we can. We try to have the judge explain it in non-legal, understandable terms. Some part of the jury instruction is easy to understand. For example, it's up to you, the jury, to assess the credibility of the witnesses. Anyone can understand that. Other parts get really deep into the weeds, usually when we get into the elements of the crime. And what happened today when the parties were arguing about what the jury instruction should be and should not be absolutely blew my mind. I need to call this out. We collectively, prosecutors, are pushing the boundaries of due process here. The general back and forth in the courtroom today was the defense lawyers saying, Your Honor, please tell the jury specifically what the other crime is, right? Prosecutors have to prove falsified records for another crime. Defense lawyers were begging him. They have to know what the other crime is. And prosecutors were saying, no, let's keep it very vague and general. It's a bizarro world. I know that there is some aggressive reading of the New York statute that says, well, the jury doesn't really have to know what the other crime is. But to me, that suggests that the DA's office is hell-bent on getting the conviction now and worry about the fallout.
And the hell-bent judge was in on it as well. That was just before the verdict. He, same guy, subsequently has written a piece, New York Magazine, really torching this whole process. And I've seen there's a certain strain of folks on the left really viciously fighting it out amongst themselves about the legal niceties, Dave, of whether or not the second crime had to have been specified in the indictment or if some other court documents were good enough. And, well, Trump was kind of able to defend against them, but not really. And they are so deep in the weeds on this stuff that I think to the average person, it's like, what are you guys even talking about?
Right. Well, look, you made a point. They're not going to stop, and they're not going to stop. They will do everything they can to stop Donald Trump. But the left, which in large parts wants to burn everything down, and every time a decision doesn't go their way, burn down the Supreme Court. And if somebody is convicted of something that they don't think is right, they riot in the streets and all of those things. Suddenly now we can't question the court. This is sort of the base of the base is just thrilled with this. They got what they wanted, and the ends always justify the means with these people. So I think let me just reiterate again, I think Trump is in a lot of trouble here, not because things shouldn't get through an appeal process and there should be a proper appeal and all of that. I just think the momentum of the system is trying to show Trump the door. And at the moment, they've been able to do it.
What about electorally? Legally, you think he's in some trouble. What about
electorally, as I said before, I think an awful lot of people are breaking towards Trump. Let's put it this way. I personally, and I have not heard from one audience member of mine that has broken away from Trump because of this. Now, I get it. What's his name? Alex Soros, George Soros' son, said, we have to keep calling him convicted criminal Donald Trump or convicted felon. Convicted felon.
And by
Donald
the way, the
Trump.
Soroses funded Alvin Bragg's anti-Trump campaign, and they're the criminal justice people who don't want to use the term convicted felon unless it's about Donald Trump. Like, they couldn't
if you're
be
a
any
rapist,
more obvious.
If you're a rapist, you're not a convicted felon, but Donald Trump has to be a convicted felon. So all of these things lead us to believe that they will keep pushing. And what the pushing actually does, to answer your question, is get more people to back Trump. I'm looking at someone who now may begrudgingly vote for Donald Trump who didn't last time. I did vote for him last time. I'm absolutely voting for him this time. These are the choices we've been given. And you might argue there were better choices along the way and we should have had a different primary process or all of that. But that's way past where we're at now. And the other piece of this, of course, is who in their right mind, really outside of the MSNBC DC class, who is backing Biden? The base seems to hate him over the Gaza war. Anyone that's looking objectively at this stuff, when you look at the border and crime and drugs and everything else, can't think the guy's doing particularly well. Guy, I don't know if you've seen any videos of him. He also has dementia. That seems like a problem. So there's a series of things here that now make this election feel completely like it would not surprise me if we get to election day in 4 months from now, and neither one of them are on the ticket. How about that?
Trump or Biden?
Yeah.
I would be very surprised.
It would not blow me out of the water.
Okay.
I would say it's more likely that Biden won't be on than Trump, because it's more likely that the Democrats will just chuck him.
Here's the thing, because you're talking about kind of the weaponizing of the whole thing. And part of what I wrote at Town Hall last week, and we talked about it on the show on Friday as well, and this is something that came up in conversations with Mary Catherine Ham, who is in the same boat as me in terms of sort of voting history and thoughts on Donald Trump and all of that. It's three strikes. You've got Russia collusion, which they doctored up. That was a made-up thing by the Democrats. Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC paid a foreign ex-spy to make up a bunch of things about Donald Trump, which was then like filtered through the intelligence agencies and the FBI and then leaked out to the media to make it seem like Donald Trump was a Russian Manchurian candidate.
You might say that Hillary Clinton illegally used campaign funds to do that. You might.
Right, you might. So that hung over his whole presidency, and finally the Mueller report came out, but this was years later, and people still don't accept that that there was no collusion, but that's the fact. Then, right before the last presidential election, we had a laptop that was absolutely real, that had some, I don't know if it would have flipped the election, but it had some genuine damaging information about not just the president's son, but about the president himself and the whole scheme to enrich the family. And the Biden campaign called up their friends who were in the intelligence community for years and said, we need you guys to write a letter. And 50 of them signed it saying Russian disinformation, all the hallmarks, blah, blah, blah. Then, again, they stamped their imprimatur on it, handed it right back to the Biden campaign from whence it came, and then Joe Biden shows up on the debate stage and waves that piece of paper around saying, see, that's a second, I think, deep abuse. And here we have this. Whatever you think of Trump, whatever you think of some of these other cases, this New York case is an absolute pathetic joke that is only charged because it's Donald Trump. And they didn't prove it, but it's a New York jury, and they stacked the whole thing with a judge who donated to Joe Biden. You put those three strikes in a row, it is hard for someone like me to look at that and say whatever Trump is more dangerous than that.
That's precisely the point. And I would say to you, Guy, for whatever your reservations might be at this point, if you care about the border, you know Trump will be better on the border. He will not be perfect on the border. He didn't build a wall. The deep state rolled him on COVID. So I'm not sitting here as some like crazed Trump sycophant. But what I am sitting here saying is that for the things that most Americans care about, a border, economy, I don't know, somewhat remotely sensible foreign policy. We had Middle East peace while he was president, and a couple other things, boys aren't girls, for example. I don't know, Trump would be better. So I would say
policy-wise, I have big differences with him on a few of them, but overall, policy-wise, obviously. To me, this is more
beyond,
existential.
Yes.
You could wipe away all of the issues and say, like, hey, let's import a whole bunch of different issues.
I'm just giving you a little extra teeth in case you needed reminding.
I appreciate that. I'm just saying this is on a different plane. And this is about something happening in the country that is extremely disturbing to me. On a separate note, but kind of related, because I think what we hear a lot from Biden, and we're going to hear it from them, this is one of their favorite lines, is Trump is chaos. Chaos equals Trump. Sometimes true. Their whole pitch to voters in 2020 was, let's end the chaos and go with us. Well, there's a lot of chaos in almost every facet of life. You just ran through a few of the examples, the border, inflation, overseas, et cetera. One manifestation of really wild left-wing chaos played out in Philadelphia. I think it was yesterday or the day before. So it's now Pride Month, which I had forgotten until all the
Happy Pride, Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Yes,
and right back at you.
Great.
With all the rainbow everything in the last couple of days, fine. If that's your thing, go for it. It's not my favorite thing. I don't really do it, but go for it. It doesn't bother me. But in Philly, they're like, okay, Pride Parade time. And the Pride Parade got interrupted and stopped by the Palestine-Hamas people. Who are you rooting for here, Dave? And where do the Queers for Palestine come down on this?
Well, first off, Palestine for Queers is very different than Queers for Palestine. But it's ironic that intersectionality basically got stopped at an intersection.
Yes.
That's pretty much what happened here. Who am I rooting for? Well, you know, in every big monster movie, Godzilla, usually there's always a scene towards the end where there's an Asian man and he's standing amongst chaos, a Japanese man, and he's got one tear in his eye, and everyone he knows is dead. The future and the past have all been destroyed, and Godzilla's there with Mecha Godzilla or whatever the monster
Mothra
is. Or Mothra, it doesn't matter. And he says, let them fight. And that's basically how I feel about this. If the Islamists want to fight the furries, like, let them fight, and it'll start sorting itself out. That's kind of where we're at.
If the woke
Islamists versus furries, 2025. Yeah, it's pay-per-view.
If the woke sort of grievance Olympics were a video game, would this battle be the final boss?
It might be, because it's the most perfect example of the ludicrousness of intersectionality in the first place. The idea that you could take these groups that have absolutely nothing in common. I mean, truly, Islamists who want to throw gays off roofs and gays who would prefer not to be thrown off roofs. The idea that you could combine them into one transformer that was somehow bigger and stronger and more powerful is completely absurd. So it really is the perfect one. And I think we must encourage them and have at it, guys. Let's go.
Like some of them are leaving the Pride Parade to join the Palestinian protests. Like, see, we're with you.
Yeah.
But then they're chanting like, no pride in genocide. What is that supposed to
Guy,
mean?
I'm going to work a little blue for a Monday, but you will end up on your knees either way.
Uh-oh. I'll let the audience interpret that however they might. I know how I'm interpreting it. And for that reason,
I think it was a fairly clever quib right there.
Dave Rubin, we are actually out of time. I'm not sending it to break.
Right,
we actually have to go to break, but that's pretty good. Dave, it's great to see you.
You too.
The Rubin Report, look it up, and then hopefully I will be down in Florida at some point. We can do this on your turf.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll be right back.